Hebrews chapter 4, verse 15, if you would turn there with me. Hebrews chapter 4, verse 15. This passage, of course, speaking about Jesus. For we do not have a high priest who cannot sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who has been tempted in all things as we are, yet without sin. I don't find it especially astounding that God would not sin, but that he came to live here in a human body and became not just God, but also man, and that he lived 30 years without committing any sin, without ever doing anything that was wrong. That's what I find astounding. And, some people talk about, it's impossible for God to sin. He can't sin. He couldn't have made the choice to sin. When he came as a man, I think it's possible. Jesus could have. It was within his realm of possibility to do something that would be wrong, to do something immoral. And I think this verse just about says that, because the Hebrews author says he can sympathize with our weaknesses because he was tempted or tested in all things like we are. Now, if that was no real test for him, if that was no real challenge, if it would have been impossible for him to make a wrong choice, how would that have increased his ability to sympathize with us? If that was no test, no temptation, I don't see how that would have increased his ability to sympathize with what we go through. And so for me, that pretty much settles it. He could have done the wrong thing. He just didn't. And that's an amazing fact, that he always chose well. You ever get frustrated? Maybe you're tired and that contributes to it. And somebody does something that gets on your nerves. And it's something you told them time and again about. And they do it again. And you're frustrated and you say something harsh. And 10 minutes later or the next day, you think, man, I should not have reacted that way. I should not have said that thing I said to them. I've done that. Anybody else done that in here? Okay, all right. Surprised it's not more hands. There were several, though. James chapter 3, verse 8. No one can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil and full of deadly poison. And Jesus tamed it. Jesus never said something he should not have said. It's amazing to me. He always thought of his mission first. And after that, concerns about himself. He didn't put himself first. He put the mission first. To serve the Father, to serve man. Never put his self-centered concerns ahead of that. I cannot say the same. In Philippians chapter 2, Paul teaches us to live this way. Philippians chapter 2, verse 4. Do not merely look out for your own personal interests, but also for the interests of others. Have this attitude in yourselves, which was also in Christ Jesus. If we back up to verse 3, do nothing from selfishness or empty conceit, but with humility of mind, let each of you regard one another as more important than himself. Now, I think all of us could raise our hands. We've done that sometimes. Sometimes. Maybe often. Maybe usually. But, I think back and I know I could tell you times that I've thought of me first instead of the mission I'm supposed to be about, instead of the Lord and what would be good to do. Jesus never messed up on that. Never once. He lived as a man, and by that I don't just mean a human being. He lived as a male person, a man. And in that, he never looked at a woman improperly. Matthew chapter 5, verse 28. I say to you that whoever looks on a woman to lust for her has committed adultery with her already in his heart. Jesus never once did that. I can't say the same. He was tested and tempted in all the ways we are, yet without sin. How did he manage that? Well, I would suggest to you that he had some advantages. Now, I'm not going to complain about him having advantages. And we can, we recognize that he is the creator of everything. Colossians chapter 1. Colossians chapter 1, verse 12 beginning. Giving thanks to the Father, who has qualified us to share in the inheritance of the saints in light, for he delivered us from the domain of darkness and transferred us to the kingdom of his beloved Son, Jesus, in whom we have redemption, the forgiveness of sins, and he, Jesus, is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation, for by him all things were created, both in the heavens and on earth, visible and invisible. Whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things have been created by him and for him. All things created by him, Jesus, and for him, Jesus. Jesus established, I don't want to say he did it without the Father, but he had his role in that, in creating all that is, in establishing the order of morality. If he established the order of morality, then he knows the order of morality. And it's very clear to him as he comes here to live on earth, because of who he is, his role in establishing the order of morality, he knows why immoral things are bad. He knows, this is why we told people, don't do these things. He knew everything about that, right? So he understands perfectly and comprehends perfectly that the reason things are labeled as sins. He sees the harm that they do very clearly. Sometimes we don't see that harm as clearly as he would have, as he lived here as a man. So that's an advantage that he had. Now I'm going to step down to my pew here because I left the remote down here. We can sit back and make excuses for ourselves about, Jesus had advantages, so of course he lived well, but we don't have those advantages, and we can excuse ourselves and say, it's not expected of us to live that well. Right? We can make excuses like that. But better is to maybe look at the advantages Jesus had and recognize that while I'm never going to achieve that advantage fully, I can come closer to it than I have. Jesus perfectly understood why sinful things are bad, why they're harmful. Therefore, don't do them. That's a help, right? If we'll understand that better than we have in the past, if we'll understand why lying is hurtful, it destroys trust, it destroys relationships. If we think about things like that, it's going to help us, it's going to be a strength for us to not lie again to people. Because we recognize, if I lie, let me stop and back up for a second. I remember my brother and sister-in-law talking about the first time their daughter lied to them. There were some marking on the wall of their home. Was it on the walls? I know it was on her shoes. Maybe it wasn't on the walls at all. So I know it was on her shoes. She had little sneakers, and the white part of the toe, there were markings on there. And my brother sat her down and said, April, how did those markings get on your shoe? I don't know. And Scott said, well, somebody did it. It wasn't me, and it wasn't your mama. Who did it? She was their only child at that point. And she said, I think she had learned some things from Genesis chapter 3. She said, a snake did it. And my brother asked her, how did the snake hold the marker? He held it in his mouth. And he eventually told her, no, you did that. And they punished her for marking on her shoes. Now, that's a cute little story. But as you grow older and you tell lies, it destroys trust, right? Destroys relationships, right? And if we never learn that lesson, that lying destroys relationships and destroys trust, then we'll just keep on lying. But if we can come closer to the advantage Jesus had of perfectly understanding why sinful things are evil and destructive, then we're going to, stop telling lies to people. Because we recognize it's a bad thing. So that's what I want to talk about this morning. I want to talk about a few ways that Jesus, he had some advantages. But while we're never going to perfectly achieve that level of understanding that he had about things, we can come closer to it than perhaps we are today. So, I want to start with just a few verses here about our responsibility to do that. 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 1. 1 Corinthians 11, verse 1. Be imitators of me, that is Paul. Oh, well, I thought we were talking about being more like Jesus. Let me finish the verse. Be imitators of me, just as I also am of Christ. Imitate him. 1 John chapter 2, verse 6. 1 John chapter 2 and verse 6. The one who says he abides in him ought himself to walk in the same manner as he walked. Walk like Jesus walked. Be like Jesus. Philippians chapter 2, verse 5, the verse we read just a few moments ago. Have this attitude in yourselves, which was also in Christ Jesus. So we need to be like Jesus. And those things that would have helped him would have been a strength to him in recognizing, I'm not going to do that, and I know why I'm not going to do that. Understand those things a little more like he understood those things. So the first area of this I want to talk about, I know we're kind of well into the sermon. I'm just now getting to my first point of the points of my lesson, is that Jesus perfectly understood the motivation to love God. We're born into this world and we start doing things and living certain ways, and we may not really love God, and we may not understand why. Why should I love God? And, if we've learned some from the Bible, then we know some of the basic reasons, but maybe it's not all there like it should be. James chapter 1, verses 17 and 18 is a good help to me in understanding why we should love God. James chapter 1, verse 17. Every good thing bestowed and every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shifting shadow. In the exercise of his will, he brought us forth by the word of truth, so that we might be, as it were, the first fruits among his creatures. Every good thing. Think of all the good things you enjoy. Family relationships, husband or wife, children you love, those are good things. A beautiful sunny day. Scenery that's not like South Dakota in the fall that we were talking about before class this morning, where everything's just brown. It's not like that year-round in South Dakota. But the beauty of the world around us. Food. Not just having food, but food that tastes good. Have I ever told you all about the time the dentist numbed my taste buds? Have I ever told you about that? Okay. God, He could have given us the equivalent of dry dog food for food, but He didn't. And I really learned to appreciate fully the fact that food tastes good and that God gave us the ability to taste the wonders of good food when the dentist gave me a shot to numb my mouth so he could work on me. And he gave me the shot a little bit wrong. So that evening, when I was expecting all the feeling to come back, it wasn't coming back. And I called him the next day. The feeling still wasn't back in my mouth, and my taste buds were dead, as well as the rest of everything. So I couldn't taste food. And he told me, he said, okay, I must have angled the shot a little bit wrong. It's a thing that can happen. And hopefully, within a few days or weeks or maybe even a few months, that'll come back. But he said it may not ever come back. It did take a couple of months. And during that time, when I ate food, it was just a chore. I have to put this glop in my mouth, and I have to mash it up with my teeth, and then I have to swallow it, and there's no joy in it at all. And I just have to put more in there, mash that up with my teeth, and then swallow it. Think if God hadn't given us taste buds. Think if God hadn't made food that tastes good. He blesses us in so many ways. Every good thing that you can think of is something about the way God has made us and made this world for us to be able to enjoy things. Every good thing. Now, there are some things that we think are good things, and we use wrongly, the things God has blessed us with, but that ends up with problems. Every truly good thing is a gift God has given us. Why to love God? Because He's made a wonderful existence for us here. As many bad things as do happen, as many trials as we do go through, He has blessed us so richly in so many different ways. He's been nothing but good for us. In the physical world and in terms of salvation. That He sent His Son to die for us. Because we've been stubborn and resisted His will. Why love God? Jesus understood why God is worthy of love. He was part of all that creation process. And He was part of God's very plan to redeem us. He saw clearly why to love God. The more we think about it, the more we can love God more clearly, more fully, and have that advantage that Jesus had, if you want to call that an advantage. Jesus perfectly saw the goal of redemption and heaven. In Hebrews chapter 12, first couple of verses there of Hebrews chapter 12, we're told to have courage to run the race that's set before us. We've got like a stadium full of all these heroes of faith from Hebrews chapter 11 cheering us on. And in verse 2, the Hebrews author says that we should be fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of faith, who for the joy set before Him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is sat down at the right hand of God. Jesus perfectly saw the goal that was in front of Him. It wasn't clouded by anything else. He wanted to have us as His faithful people. And He wanted Himself to be back in heaven. As He prayed in John chapter 17, restore to me the glory that I had with you before the world was. He wanted to be back in heaven, and He wanted to bring us with Him. All of that was very clear in His mind. We get so clouded up with other goals that are before us, other goals that are in front of our eyes. We want this thing and we want that thing, and we're striving to get this thing. Those goals don't compare. And if we will be a little more like Jesus and perfectly see this goal, and that's why the Hebrews author says there in Hebrews chapter 12, verse 2, in fact, let me read verse 1 and then into verse 2. Therefore, since we have so great a cloud of witnesses surrounding us, let us also lay aside every encumbrance, the sin which so easily entangles us. Let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, fixing our eyes on Jesus. Fix your eyes on Jesus. We use fix a lot to mean repair. To fix the lawnmower. Fix means, in this sense, to put your eyes there, and they're there. And they're not going to be somewhere else. They're there. You fix your hands on the steering wheel, and you're not going to be busy with your phone and, everything else. Fix your eyes on Jesus. He perfectly saw his goal, redemption and heaven. We need to so clearly see our goal of being in heaven with him. Jesus, I already kind of alluded to this next point in our introduction to the lesson this morning. Jesus perfectly saw the effects, the evil effects of sin. He's the one that was responsible for telling us, don't do these things. Why? Just because he wanted to come up with a list of things we shouldn't do so that he could test us, see if we would obey him or not? No. He told us don't do these things because they're harmful. So don't do them. He perfectly saw the evil effects of sin. I'm in Hebrews chapter 5, verse 14. But solid food is for the mature, who because of practice have their senses trained to discern good and evil. I want to tell you something about the word evil. We think of the word evil too often meaning sinful. Now, that you may be wondering, well, why am I criticizing that point of view? The basic sense of the word evil is something that is harmful, something that's bad. And that's why God says those are sins, don't do them, because they're harmful or bad. So for example, in the book of Job, a whirlwind is called evil. A whirlwind, like a tornado, Are tornadoes sinful? Tornado's not committing a sin. It's just some condensation of wind. But they are evil because they're harmful and bad. Sin is evil because sin is harmful and bad. And the mature Christian, who, because of practice, has his senses trained to discern good and evil. So, you first become a Christian and, there's 15 things you've been doing that now you're told you can't do them anymore, right? And yeah, and you may not understand the why of all of that yet. Well, what's wrong with that? What's the harm in it? But the more mature in Christ you become, the more you recognize, oh yeah, because doing that has this consequence, and that's bad and harmful. So as we mature, as we become more like Christ, adopting this advantage of Christ, of fully understanding, or more fully, at least, understanding the harm, the evil effect of sin, the better off we're going to be, because we can, as this passage says, discern between good and evil. Discern between those things which are good and build people up and build myself up, and evil things that are destructive and harmful. Jesus, I'm convinced, perfectly understood the terror of hell. In 2 Thessalonians chapter 1, verse 9, Paul is writing back to the church in Thessalonica. There have been people there in Thessalonica, unbelievers, who have been persecuting those Christians, pretty fiercely persecuting those Christians in Thessalonica. And in 2 Thessalonica chapter 1, verse 9, Paul says, "And these will pay the penalty of eternal destruction away from the presence of the Lord and from the glory of his power." Away from the presence of the Lord and from the glory of his power. I'm convinced that the worst thing about hell is that you are completely separated from every good thing. You know, we talked about how God blesses us earlier. Do Christians and also non-Christians enjoy blessings of God in this world? Yeah, of course. They taste the good food just like we do. They have good family relationships just like we do. Now, they may end up destroying some of that with their sinful activities, but they enjoy physical blessings of God in this world, this physical world. They're enjoying physical blessings from God. Then we die, and we leave this physical world. And if we've been faithful to God, then we're still going to be with God after death and enjoy the spiritual blessings that we've been enjoying, and even more, the spiritual blessings with him in heaven. But the non-Christian, when he dies, he leaves this physical world, and that was the only kind of blessings he was enjoying. The only good things he was enjoying were physical things that God has given us. He leaves the physical world, goes to the spiritual world. Well, he was never enjoying spiritual blessings from God because he wasn't with God. God wasn't blessing him spiritually. And now he's dead, out of the physical world, and in only a spiritual world. So no good things. Not physical blessings from God, not spiritual blessings from God. These will pay the penalty of eternal destruction away from the presence of the Lord and from the glory of his power. I'm confident that Jesus had a very clear picture of what it will be like to be completely separated from all the good things God does for us, physical and spiritual. And we need to dwell on that, mentally dwell on what that would be like. Think about that. And think, you know, this life that I'm living now in rebellion against God, is it worth it? You know? I'm going to end up with nothing, no good thing, and no good people to be around. Everybody just enjoying nothing. Jesus understood that. We need to understand that and understand it well. Jesus understood the goodness of righteousness. James chapter 1, verse 17, we already noticed. Every good thing bestowed on us comes down from the Father. It's a blessing from the Father. That's the goodness of righteousness. Romans chapter 12, verse 2. I'll read verses 1 and 2. I urge you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, chapters 1 through 11 of Romans, he's been telling them about the mercies of God, what God has done to save us. And now he urges us, by those mercies of God, to present your bodies a living and holy sacrifice, acceptable to God, which is your spiritual service of worship. And don't be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what the will of God is. That which is good and acceptable and perfect. Let me read verse 2 again. Don't be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you get this transformation of your mind, where you're wanting to serve God, and you've been molded now to understand God and to appreciate God and therefore serve God. You've gone through this renewal of your mind so that you may prove what the will of God is. What is the will of God? It's that which is good and acceptable and perfect. This transformation, this renewal of your mind is how you prove to yourself and how you prove to others that the will of God is good. It's not restrictive, it's not binding, it's freeing of all the problems that we would otherwise have. It's giving us good things in life, good blessings from God, spiritual and physical. That's what the will of God is. Jesus would have perfectly understood all of this. That, yeah, the will of God, that's what's good for us. He understood the goodness of righteousness. And finally, Jesus knew people's needs. Do you know the needs of people around you? Some of them, I'm sure you do. You recognize in the lives of some people around you, I know what that person needs. And maybe I can help fulfill, maybe I can be that for that person. Or maybe I can't, but I know somebody who can be that for that person. But other times, we have no idea what somebody, even somebody kind of close to us, really needs. We don't really understand each other's needs all that well. But can we understand them better? Some people don't pay a bit of attention to people around them. All they're thinking about is what they want, what they want to do. And it just doesn't even occur to them to think about, what does that person need? Right? You know people like that probably. I can think of a couple of names in my own mind about people who they just don't think about what other people want, what other people need. And so we grow from that to thinking about what other people need. Baby comes into the world, your 3 little ones there. When they were born, did they care about anybody else? No. I'm hungry, I want food. That's how we come into the world. I'm uncomfortable because I've got a full diaper. Somebody better solve that for me. They don't think about, when they're 3 months old, they don't think about, what could I do for Daddy today? We learn to think about others. Jesus knew fully the needs of people around him. We need to grow out of that stage where we just don't think about it and really think about this person next to me, this person that I spend time with, this person that I work with. Notice what they need and be there for them and fulfill those needs. Jesus knew that. We see Jesus interacting with people, and he knew what they needed time and again without them telling him what they needed. We're never going to fully know the needs of people around us like Jesus. But we can come closer to that than we have been, right? We can kind of adopt that advantage that he had. I finally did it. There we go. Knowing the people, knowing the needs of people around us. So we look at Jesus' life and how Hebrews chapter 4 verse 15 tells us that he lived without sin, never overlooking what should be done, always doing what was good and right. And we can see some of the reasons that he was able to do that. And it's still going to be a challenge for us. And we're never fully going to understand things and see things and recognize things as fully as he did. But we can come closer to it. And that's going to help us live more like Jesus. I want to go back and close with Hebrews chapter 12, passage that we've already read. Hebrews chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. Therefore, since we have so great a cloud of witnesses surrounding us, all those heroes of faith from Hebrews chapter 11, let us also, Lay aside every encumbrance and the sin which so easily entangles us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Fix your eyes on him, be more like him, and live more like him. In a moment, we're going to stand and sing our song of invitation. An empty mansion, I believe, is the song. Here, I labor and toil as I look for a home, just a humble abode among men, while in heaven a mansion is waiting for me, and a gentle voice pleading, come in. He pleads with us to come to him. It's better there to come to him and to have all the blessings that he wants to give us. If you have some need this morning, would you come as we stand and sing?